The morning they chose to destroy me at 9:12 a.m. The knock on my office door sounded far too polite to carry the weight it did. I looked up from a stack of merger agreements as my assistant opened the door. A man in a navy suit stepped inside, holding a thick envelope in both hands. "Ms. Naomi Brooks?" "I am." "You've been served." His voice carried no emotion. It never does. People who deliver lawsuits learn very quickly that sympathy only makes their job harder. I accepted the envelope without letting my hand shake. The paper felt heavier than it should have. The conference room overlooked downtown Atlanta, where sunlight reflected off glass towers and painted the city in gold. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and polished walnut. Everything around me represented years of discipline, sacrifice, and quiet determination. None of it prepared me for the name I saw on the first page. Monica Brooks Caldwell. My daughter. For a single heartbeat, time stopped. Then I continued reading. The complaint demanded $2,480,000 in damages and immediate ownership of my late husband's historic townhouse, claiming I had manipulated estate documents for my own financial benefit. It wasn't just a lawsuit. It was an accusation that I had stolen from my own family. I slowly closed the file before anyone in the room noticed the change in my expression. "Would you like me to call security?" my assistant asked softly. I offered a small smile. "No." The process server nodded politely before leaving. The door clicked shut. Silence settled over the room. I looked through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city below, wondering how a child I had loved with every piece of my heart could believe I was capable of such betrayal. The answer arrived almost immediately. She hadn't written those allegations herself. Someone else had. Someone who understood exactly how to turn grief into a weapon. Someone named Ethan Caldwell, my son-in-law. Ethan always wore confidence like an expensive tailored suit. He came from money, spoke with effortless certainty, and believed every room belonged to him before he even entered it. The first time we met, he smiled warmly while quietly evaluating the price of everything around him, including me. He often joked that corporate lawyers only made money cleaning up other people's mistakes. What kind of real businesswoman spends her life fixing problems other people create? He once asked during dinner. I smiled then. I remembered every word now. He thought I had forgotten. He was wrong. Across town, my parents were almost certainly celebrating Monica's decision. My father, Harold Brooks, had spent my entire childhood measuring love by achievement, appearance, and public reputation. My younger sister Monica always satisfied every category. She inherited lighter skin, softer features, and effortless charm. I inherited discipline. Apparently, that wasn't enough. My mother, Lorraine, believed family loyalty meant unquestioning obedience. Whenever I challenged unfair treatment, she would quietly remind me, peace is more important than being right. I spent years believing her. Not anymore. The phone buzzed across my desk. Monica's name appeared on the screen. I answered. "Mom," she began carefully, "this doesn't have to become ugly." I listened without interrupting. "Ethan says settling now is better than embarrassing everyone in court." There it was. Not her voice. His. "I understand," I replied. You're not angry?" "No." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. She expected outrage. She expected tears. Instead, she received calm. They had absolutely no idea why. After hanging up, I unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk. Hidden beneath ordinary client files rested a cream-colored envelope sealed with dark blue wax. My late husband had placed it in my hands 6 months before cancer took him. "Only open this if someone turns our family into a courtroom," he had whispered. I never broke the seal. Not even my estate attorney knew it existed. I carried the envelope home that evening and placed it inside the old steel safe hidden behind a bookshelf. The lock clicked shut. I rested my hand against the cold metal for a long moment. Then I smiled. They just sued the wrong woman. The daughter they always chose. Some wounds never bleed. They simply become part of the way you breathe. Long before my daughter filed that lawsuit, I understood what it felt like to live inside a family where love was measured instead of given. I was the older daughter, the one who studied harder, worked longer, and carried responsibilities no one noticed. Monica was the younger one, blessed with lighter skin, effortless charm, and the kind of smile that made strangers immediately trust her. Growing up, people often called us beautiful sisters, but the compliments never landed equally. Monica has such delicate features, relatives would say during family reunions. Then someone would glance toward me. And Naomi, she's so intelligent. It sounded like praise. It never felt like it. I learned early that intelligence was the consolation prize handed to girls who were never considered the favorite. My father rarely hid his preferences. Harold Brooks believed appearances opened doors faster than character ever could. Whenever report cards arrived, he barely looked at mine before asking how Monica was doing in school. When I graduated near the top of my class, he nodded once and congratulated me with a firm handshake. 2 years later, Monica finished with average grades, and my parents rented a ballroom to celebrate her future. I smiled in every family photograph. No one noticed how carefully I practiced that smile. My mother always defended the imbalance. Families need harmony, Lorraine would tell me while straightening the dining table. Your sister needs encouragement more than you do. Encouragement. That word followed me into adulthood. When I earned my law degree, they called me ambitious. When Monica became engaged, they called her inspiring. When I purchased my first home without financial help, my parents asked whether I was working too much. When Monica bought designer furniture with Ethan's money, they admired her excellent taste. I stopped comparing our lives because comparison only rewarded disappointment. Instead, I built my own future. Years later, I transitioned from corporate law into crisis management and eventually founded my own consulting firm. Companies hired me when scandals threatened billion-dollar reputations. I negotiated settlements, rebuilt public trust, and protected businesses from collapsing under pressure. Every victory strengthened my reputation. Quietly, deliberately. I never needed applause. I only needed results. My success, however, became a source of amusement for Ethan. During one Thanksgiving dinner, he leaned back in his chair, swirling expensive wine inside a crystal glass, while everyone listened. "So, Naomi," he said with a grin, "are you still playing executive?" The table fell silent. I looked at him calmly. I wasn't aware leadership was a game. He chuckled. "My investment firm creates real wealth. Consultants just clean up other people's disasters." My father laughed. Monica smiled into her glass. Even my mother avoided looking at me. I simply took another bite of dinner. Arguing with arrogance only feeds it. Ethan mistook my silence for surrender. He had absolutely no idea silence was where I did my best thinking. Over the next several months, I noticed small inconsistencies whenever Ethan discussed his redevelopment projects. He proudly described transforming neglected neighborhoods into luxury communities. Investors praised his vision. Local newspapers called him a business innovator. Something never felt right. The numbers sounded polished. The stories did not. One afternoon, while reviewing unrelated property records for a corporate client, I recognized the name of Ethan's investment company attached to multiple residential transfers. Curiosity became concern. Concern became suspicion. The contracts appeared legal at first glance, but several clauses granted unusually broad authority after minor payment defaults. Elderly homeowners were signing agreements they clearly did not fully understand. Many of those homeowners shared something else in common. They were older Black families living in neighborhoods their grandparents had built decades earlier. They trusted promises. Ethan monetized trust. What they didn't know was that the redevelopment agreements quietly shifted ownership rights long before construction ever began. One widow lost the house where she had raised 4 children. A retired veteran surrendered property worth nearly $1 million for a fraction of its value. Another family discovered the eviction notice only after believing they had approved simple renovation financing. Every document carried flawless legal formatting. Every signature appeared valid. Everything looked clean. Except it wasn't. I couldn't accuse Ethan without evidence. Professional instinct demanded patience. Personal emotion demanded action. The conflict exhausted me. Meanwhile, family dinners continued as though nothing was wrong. My parents praised Ethan's business achievements. Monica admired his growing influence. I listened. I remembered. I watched. Each conversation revealed another piece of a puzzle no one else seemed willing to see. Then came the evening that finally changed me. It was nearly 11:43 p.m. Rain tapped softly against the windows of my office, while most of downtown had already gone dark. The building's air conditioning hummed quietly through empty hallways. My desk lamp cast a warm circle of light across stacks of contracts and financial reports. For the first time in years, I stopped pretending my family would someday recognize my worth. No promotion would change them. No award would impress them. No sacrifice would earn the love I had spent my entire life chasing. The realization hurt. Then it liberated me. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and released a slow breath. If they insisted on seeing me as the outsider, I would stop asking for a seat at their table. From that night forward, I would build my own. Not through anger. Not through revenge born from emotion. Through preparation. Through truth. Through strategy. I opened a fresh legal notebook and wrote one sentence across the first page. Facts before feelings. I underlined it once. Then I smiled. That was the last night I ever asked anyone to choose me. The file he protected 3 days after the lawsuit arrived, I drove to the one place that had always felt untouched by judgment. My grandfather's house stood at the end of a quiet street lined with towering oak trees whose branches swayed gently in the autumn breeze. The white porch showed its age, and the flower beds were no longer as neat as they had been years ago, but every corner still carried the warmth of a home built on honesty instead of appearances. The grandfather clock inside chimed 10:30 a.m. as I stepped through the front door. Grandpa Benjamin looked up from his favorite leather chair and smiled before I spoke a single word. "I've been expecting you, Naomi." His voice had softened with age, but his eyes remained as sharp as ever. I bent down and hugged him carefully. "You already know." He nodded once. "I know enough." The smell of fresh coffee drifted through the room while sunlight filtered across polished hardwood floors. Family photographs covered one wall. Some captured birthdays and graduations. Others showed people who had long since passed away. One picture stopped me. It was my late husband smiling beside Grandpa during a fishing trip years earlier. Grandpa noticed where I was looking. "He trusted me," he said quietly. "I know." "No," he replied. "You know he loved you. What you don't know is how carefully he prepared for this day." My heartbeat slowed. Without another word, Grandpa reached beneath the side table and lifted an old leather folder secured with a brass lock. The brown leather had faded over time, and its edges showed decades of careful handling. He rested it on the coffee table between us. "I promised him I wouldn't give this to anyone unless someone tried to take your future through the courts." I stared at the folder. "So he knew?" "He didn't predict the lawsuit," Grandpa answered. "He predicted greed. The room became silent except for the ticking clock. Grandpa removed a small silver key from his shirt pocket and unlocked the folder. Inside rested carefully organized documents separated by labeled dividers. He handed me the first section, the original family trust. Every page carried official seals, notarized signatures, and filing references. The next section contained original property deeds dating back decades. Another divider revealed a notarized amendment signed less than 2 months before my husband's death. I frowned. I've never seen this. You weren't supposed to. My fingers hesitated over the final sections. A black flash drive rested inside a protective sleeve. Beside it sat private financial audits and transcripts of recorded conversations. Each document had been preserved with extraordinary care. What exactly am I looking at? Grandpa folded his hands. Insurance. I looked up. Against Ethan. Those 2 words settled over the room with astonishing weight. He always worried about Ethan? I asked. From the very beginning. Grandpa leaned back slowly. Your husband admired confidence. He never admired arrogance. He saw the difference before anyone else. I remembered family dinners. The expensive watches. The polished speeches. The constant need Ethan had to prove he was the smartest man in every room. Grandpa continued. He hired independent legal advisors years ago. Quiet people. Careful people. They reviewed every family asset, every business agreement, every trust document. My chest tightened. And they found something? They found someone willing to wait. I looked back at the folder. What they didn't know was that your husband changed the trust after those meetings. Grandpa tapped the notarized amendment. This provision activates only if someone files legal action accusing you of improperly controlling the estate. I read the clause twice. Then a third time. The language was precise. If litigation challenged my authority over the estate without proven misconduct, additional legal protections automatically transferred administrative control to an independent trustee while preserving every ownership interest intended for me. I slowly lowered the page. They activated it themselves. Grandpa smiled. They believed they were forcing you into bankruptcy. Instead, they had unknowingly unlocked the strongest protection my husband could have created. For the first time since receiving the lawsuit, I felt something stronger than heartbreak. Clarity. I spent the next 2 hours reviewing every document. Every signature matched. Every filing number could be verified. Every amendment followed proper legal procedure. Nothing depended upon luck. Everything depended upon facts. Before leaving, Grandpa placed one hand gently on my shoulder. Win with truth. I will. And don't let anger make decisions that wisdom should make. I won't. Back at my office, I called a private investigations firm with whom I had worked during previous corporate fraud cases. I need complete discretion, I said. We understand. No publicity. Agreed. No shortcuts. Never. I provided only the information necessary to begin. Public property transfers. Corporate filings. Mortgage records. Redevelopment agreements. Financial disclosures. Nothing more. Nothing less. The investigators quietly began tracing ownership structures, shell companies, and lending relationships connected to Ethan's investment business. I never contacted Monica. I never argued with my parents. I never answered the rumors already circulating among relatives. Silence became my greatest advantage. They thought I was overwhelmed. They thought I was preparing to negotiate. They thought the lawsuit had frightened me. Every assumption worked in my favor. 3 evenings later, the lead investigator called. We've found irregularities. Document everything. We already have. I'll wait for verified evidence. You won't be disappointed. After ending the call, I returned to the leather folder resting securely inside my office safe. I opened it one final time that evening. The documents looked exactly the same. Only I had changed. I no longer saw them as defensive paperwork. I saw them as the foundation of the truth. I carefully closed the folder, locked the safe, and allowed myself the smallest smile. Now the game belongs to me. Chapter 4. The day confidence became a liability, the courthouse felt colder than I remembered. At 8:47 a.m., I stepped through the revolving doors carrying nothing more than a slim leather portfolio. Outside, television vans lined the street, and reporters gathered behind metal barriers, hoping another high-profile family dispute would provide the day's headlines. I kept walking. Noise had never won a legal argument. Inside, polished marble reflected the morning sunlight, and every footstep echoed through the hallway. Lawyers greeted one another with practiced smiles, while clerks hurried between courtrooms carrying stacks of files. When I entered courtroom 7, I immediately noticed how full the gallery had become. Senior attorneys, commercial bankers, city officials, directors of nonprofit organizations, several respected Black business owners whom I had advised during corporate crises. None of them came for entertainment. They came because reputations were about to be tested. Across the room, Monica avoided my eyes. Ethan did the opposite. He smiled as though he had already collected the judgment. My father sat proudly beside him. My mother folded her hands quietly, occasionally whispering reassuring words to Monica. Seeing them together hurt more than I expected. Not because they opposed me, because they never questioned why. The bailiff announced the judge's arrival, and everyone stood. After opening remarks, Ethan requested permission to address the court. His attorney appeared hesitant. Ethan appeared thrilled. He walked confidently toward the witness stand, adjusted his expensive cufflinks, and smiled toward the gallery. His confidence almost looked convincing. Almost. After taking the oath, he looked directly at me. You've built your career cleaning up disasters created by real business people. A few people shifted uncomfortably. I've always wondered, he continued, how someone who only manages problems convinces herself she's successful. I said nothing. Silence has a remarkable effect on arrogant people. It encourages them to keep talking. He laughed softly. My investment company actually creates wealth. Consultants like Naomi survive because executives like me generate opportunity. His words floated confidently across the courtroom. They also settled permanently into the official transcript. What Ethan didn't know was that every exaggerated claim increased the importance of the financial records waiting quietly inside my attorney's evidence boxes. The judge thanked him and instructed counsel to continue. Hours passed as witnesses described property transfers, trust administration, and estate procedures. Then Ethan returned to the stand. This time, his confidence had grown. Wealth changes outcomes, he declared. People can pretend otherwise, but everyone knows successful people receive better treatment. His attorney glanced toward him. The warning came too late. I've negotiated deals for years, Ethan continued. Money opens doors. Several jurists sitting in the observation section exchanged brief looks. The court reporter never paused. Neither did the recording equipment. Every sentence became part of the permanent record. I remained completely still. They thought they were winning. They had absolutely no idea every unnecessary boast was quietly strengthening my position. Later that afternoon, Ethan's attorney questioned me. Ms. Brooks, did you intentionally exclude your daughter from financial decisions involving the estate? No. Did you conceal trust information? No. Were all actions taken according to the governing documents? Yes. Nothing more. Nothing less. Facts require very few words. When Ethan requested permission to speak again, the judge reluctantly allowed it. He looked directly at me. When this case ends, your reputation ends with it. His voice echoed through the courtroom. No corporation hires executives accused of stealing from their own family. I met his eyes calmly. He mistook composure for fear. I'll make sure every board in the state knows exactly who you are. The threat lingered in the air. The judge immediately reminded him to address the court professionally. He apologized, without meaning it. The afternoon session moved toward financial testimony, bank statements, property valuations, corporate structures, trust administration timelines. Each document established another piece of the overall picture. Then came questions regarding Ethan's investment firm. He answered quickly. Too quickly. Every redevelopment agreement our company handled complied fully with state and federal law. My attorney made no objection. He simply wrote something inside his notebook. Moments later, Ethan testified again. We've never received legitimate complaints from homeowners. Another note appeared. The courtroom remained quiet. No one interrupted him. No one challenged him. Not yet. Watching him speak, I realized arrogance often destroys itself more effectively than any cross-examination. The truth never needs assistance. It only needs patience. Near the end of the day, my father requested permission to provide a brief character statement supporting Monica. He described her kindness, her honesty, her loyalty. Everything he said about her was sincere. Everything he failed to say about me was equally revealing. My mother quietly added, families should trust one another. I almost smiled. If only trust had been equally distributed inside our home. The afternoon sunlight faded through the courthouse windows as proceedings drew to a close. The atmosphere had changed. Not dramatically. Subtly. Experienced attorneys no longer watched Ethan with admiration. They watched him with curiosity. Several bankers whispered while reviewing printed exhibits. One nonprofit director stared thoughtfully toward Ethan's testimony. The pieces were beginning to move. The judge reviewed the schedule for the following morning before closing the day's hearing. Then he looked toward my counsel. Counsel, he said evenly, before this court reaches any determination, I understand you intend to introduce one final item of evidence. My attorney stood. Yes, Your Honor. The judge turned toward me. When you're ready, the court will receive it. I slowly met his gaze. Then I gave a single, quiet nod. Chapter 5. The judge's decision. I arrived at the courthouse at 8:31 a.m. Wearing the same tailored black suit I had purchased after winning my first corporate trial. Thin gold lines traced the lapels, subtle enough to avoid attention yet impossible to ignore. Years earlier, my late husband had smiled when he first saw it. Wear that whenever you need to remember who you are. That morning, it wasn't simply clothing. It was armor. The hallway outside courtroom 7 buzzed with quiet conversations. Reporters waited near the entrance, cameras resting on their shoulders. Attorneys reviewed notes one final time. The scent of fresh coffee drifted through the building while polished marble reflected the morning light. I walked past every conversation without slowing. Confidence never announces itself. It simply arrives. Inside the courtroom, the gallery was fuller than the previous day. Senior attorneys occupied the front row. Bank executives, nonprofit directors, respected Black business owners, and city officials filled nearly every remaining seat. Everyone sensed the hearing was about to change. Monica looked exhausted. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes, and the certainty she had carried throughout the lawsuit had quietly disappeared. Ethan still attempted to smile. It looked forced. The judge entered promptly at 9 a.m. and the courtroom stood. After brief procedural remarks, my attorney rose. Your Honor, the defense is prepared to submit its remaining exhibits. The clerk approached our table. One by one, carefully organized binders were placed before the court. The first contained the sealed trust amendment. The second held certified property deeds. The third contained verified financial records. The fourth included redevelopment contracts. The fifth documented ownership transfers. The sixth held transcripts prepared from recorded conversations. Finally, my attorney placed a small black flash drive into an evidence envelope. Every movement was deliberate. Every document had already been authenticated. I remained seated. I said nothing. The courtroom became remarkably still. The judge reviewed the trust amendment first. His expression changed almost immediately. He read several paragraphs silently before looking toward Ethan's counsel. When was this amendment disclosed to the plaintiff? Ethan's attorney hesitated. It was not previously available to us, Your Honor. It appears properly executed and notarized. Yes, Your Honor. The judge continued reading. Across the room, I noticed Ethan's confidence begin to disappear. His shoulders stiffened. He whispered something urgently to his attorney. The attorney did not answer. What they didn't know was that the amendment completely changed the legal foundation of the lawsuit. The trust had anticipated precisely this situation. Rather than weakening my authority, the lawsuit had activated additional protections established years earlier. The judge requested the financial exhibits. Bank records appeared on courtroom monitors. Wire transfers, property acquisitions, mortgage releases, corporate ownership structures. Everything aligned. My attorney calmly explained each document while referencing official filing numbers and certified records. No dramatic performance was necessary. Facts speak clearly when they are organized. Then came the redevelopment contracts. Several clauses appeared highlighted. The judge examined them carefully. Counsel, he asked Ethan's attorney, "Are you familiar with these provisions?" The attorney adjusted his glasses. "I have not previously reviewed these specific versions. They appear substantially different from those provided during discovery." Silence. The audio recordings followed. Short excerpts played through the courtroom speakers. Voices discussed redevelopment timelines. Pressure placed upon elderly homeowners. Internal conversations about acquiring valuable properties below market value. No one raised their voice. No one needed to. The words carried enough weight on their own. For the first time since the proceedings began, Ethan looked directly at me. Not with confidence. With fear. He finally understood. The flash drive had never represented one document. It represented years of careful preservation. He had spent months preparing accusations against me. My late husband had spent years preparing the truth. The courtroom remained silent. 20 seconds. Then 25. Nearly half a minute passed without anyone speaking. The silence became almost physical. I neither smiled nor celebrated. I simply watched. Ethan shifted repeatedly in his chair before suddenly standing. This is being taken out of context. The judge looked up. "Mr. Caldwell, sit down. There are explanations. You will sit down." He obeyed. Barely. The judge resumed reviewing the evidence. "The trust amendment is valid." Another page turned. "The ownership records support the defendant's administration." Another page. "The financial documentation contradicts several sworn statements previously offered before this court." My attorney remained still. Ethan's attorney slowly lowered his head. The consequences had become unavoidable. The judge continued. Additionally, these redevelopment agreements raise serious questions extending beyond the present civil action. He looked toward the court clerk. "I am directing certified copies of these exhibits to the appropriate investigative authorities." A quiet murmur spread through the gallery. Ethan closed his eyes. His own testimony had become the strongest evidence against him. Every boast, every denial, every unnecessary statement. They had absolutely no idea he had been dismantling his own credibility one sentence at a time. The judge then addressed Monica directly. "Mrs. Caldwell, the evidence demonstrates that your claims against the defendant lack legal foundation." She stared at the documents before her. Tears formed slowly. She looked toward Ethan. He refused to meet her eyes. Only then did she understand. She had trusted the wrong person. She had mistaken manipulation for certainty. The realization broke something inside her. Quietly, without drama, the judge returned to the bench. The complaint against Ms. Brooks is dismissed with prejudice. He paused before continuing. The evidence presented today also supports referral for investigation into potential mortgage fraud, fraudulent inducement, and related financial misconduct. Every sentence struck with measured precision. Civil exposure associated with the submitted records appears to exceed $18,750,000. Another pause. Several redevelopment agreements may be subject to rescission. He reviewed one final page. Property rights of affected homeowners shall remain protected pending further proceedings. The gallery remained silent. Some witnesses looked toward me. Others watched Ethan. No one looked triumphant. Only relieved. Justice rarely feels loud. It feels steady. I gathered my portfolio while the clerk organized the exhibits. Across the aisle, Monica quietly removed her wedding ring and placed it inside her purse. Ethan stared motionless at the defense table. His confidence had vanished. His arrogance had nowhere left to hide. The judge lifted his gavel one final time. Case dismissed. Chapter 6. The fortune they never saw coming. The courthouse emptied far more quietly than it had filled. By 4:36 p.m., the television cameras had shifted toward news stories, reporters packed away their equipment, and the echo of the judge's ruling lingered in my thoughts more than in the marble halls behind me. I stood outside for a moment, feeling a cool autumn breeze brush against my face. For the first time in months, I wasn't carrying the weight of proving my innocence. I was simply carrying my future. Winning the lawsuit never felt like defeating my family. It felt like surviving them. The weeks that followed unfolded with remarkable speed. Investigators expanded their review of Ethan's business operations, examining thousands of financial records and redevelopment agreements. Civil regulators coordinated with state authorities while independent auditors traced transactions stretching back several years. The evidence spoke with extraordinary clarity. No dramatic speeches were necessary. Facts have always been more patient than lies. My father's world changed first. Harold Brooks had spent decades building a reputation among business leaders, church committees, and charitable boards. He proudly introduced himself as a man whose judgment could always be trusted. After publicly defending Ethan throughout the trial, that confidence disappeared. Invitations became less frequent. Board memberships quietly expired. Conversations ended sooner than they once had. People who admired certainty suddenly questioned his judgment. He never admitted how deeply that wounded him. He didn't have to. I could see it every time our paths crossed. For the first time in my life, he looked like a man forced to confront the difference between authority and wisdom. My mother changed differently. Lorraine never lost a title or professional position. She lost something far more personal. She lost the comforting belief that keeping peace had protected her family. One afternoon, she asked if we could meet for coffee. The cafe smelled of cinnamon and fresh bread, just as it had years earlier when she celebrated Monica's engagement. She wrapped both hands around her cup before speaking. I thought I was keeping everyone together. I looked at her quietly. You were asking one person to carry everyone else's mistakes. Tears gathered slowly in her eyes. I see that now. I know. I'm sorry. The apology was sincere. It also arrived years too late. Forgiveness and restored trust are not always the same gift. I wished her peace. I simply could not return to being the daughter who begged to be seen. Monica called several times before I finally agreed to meet. She arrived alone. There was no designer handbag. No polished confidence. No Ethan. She looked exhausted. I filed for divorce last week, she said softly. I remained silent. I believed everything he told me. I know. I should have trusted you. I nodded once. She lowered her head. I don't expect you to forgive me. Thank you. She looked confused. For what? For finally telling me the truth. We talked for nearly an hour. Not about the lawsuit. Not about the money. About choices. About fear. About how easily love becomes manipulation when it depends upon someone's approval. When we stood to leave, she reached toward me before stopping herself. I'm sorry, Mom. I believe you. Those 3 words were honest. They were also enough. Some relationships can be rebuilt. Others become respectful distances instead of close bonds. Healing does not always restore what was broken. Sometimes it simply teaches us how to stop breaking ourselves. Ethan's downfall unfolded exactly as the law required. Regulatory agencies suspended his professional licenses while criminal investigators continued reviewing financial misconduct tied to his redevelopment projects. His investment firm dissolved under mounting legal pressure. Political allies publicly distanced themselves. Clients withdrew their business. The luxury home he once treated as proof of success entered foreclosure proceedings. Assets were frozen. Civil judgments accumulated. The man who believed wealth guaranteed respect discovered that reputation cannot be purchased after trust has been spent. They thought they were winning. What they didn't know was that arrogance collects interest until the bill finally comes due. As settlements concluded and recovered funds became available through lawful proceedings, I made the only decision that allowed me to sleep peacefully. I refused to let betrayal become the final chapter of my life. Instead of measuring victory by what Ethan lost, I measured it by what other families could keep. My charitable foundation expanded its mission to provide free legal education and representation for homeowners facing deceptive redevelopment schemes. Volunteer attorneys joined our network. Financial counselors donated their expertise. Community organizations opened their doors. Within the first year, hundreds of families received legal guidance before signing contracts that might have cost them homes built through generations of sacrifice. Each successful case reminded me why truth matters long after courtrooms empty. I also established the Benjamin Brooks Scholarship for Ethical Leadership, honoring the grandfather who taught me that preparation is stronger than panic and integrity outlasts ambition. Every scholarship recipient received the same handwritten note tucked inside their award letter. Character is the only inheritance no one can steal. Whenever I visited my grandfather afterward, he asked only one question. Are you happy? Every time, my answer became easier. Yes. Not because life had become perfect. Because it had finally become peaceful. If you're listening to my story today, perhaps you've spent years trying to earn love from people who only noticed you when you were useful. Perhaps you've mistaken acceptance for approval. Perhaps you've been told to stay quiet, stay grateful, or stay small. I understand that feeling. I lived it. But I also learned something far more valuable than any courtroom victory. Your greatest triumph is never watching someone else fall. It's refusing to fall with them. If you've spent your life trying to earn love from people who only value you when you're useful, remember this. Your greatest victory isn't making them regret losing you. It's building a life where their approval no longer matters. And if my story leaves you with only one lesson, let it be this. The greatest inheritance isn't money. It's becoming someone betrayal can never bankrupt.